time of year has come that we have to pull the boats and store them for the winter. So here in the Midwest on Lake Michigan, we got to get the boats out. We got to get them on the hard and then winterize them. It's a bittersweet thing when the boats come out. This year we took the boats out on November 10th, which is kind of cool. It's my birthday, so I got a chance to be on the boat, although it was taking it out. But the bitter part of it is we lose our usage of our boat for 5 months, which is pretty hard to swallow. But the good thing is we do get to start in earnest with all of the maintenance. But first, we have to winterize it. So with Puffin today, we're going to winterize the engine. We're going to winterize the head and the holding tanks. And we're also going to put some antifreeze in the bilge. So I'll show you a little bit on how I do the engines. So let's get to it. I'm going to hop up here and we'll get started with the engine. So a couple things. Before we haul out the boat, one of the things we do is we put in a fuel additive for the diesel tank. And it is basically an anti-gelling agent, a conditioner, prevents moisture and sliming. We put that in there, and I like to let the engine run for a good 20-30 minutes to get all of that work through the fuel and into the engine before we haul out. I also pump out the holding tanks, pump the bilge, make sure everything's good there before we bring it out. So that's done in the water. A few other things I do that are kind of minor, but those are the big things that I do before I haul it out. Once I haul it out, bring it over, it gets put into this position. That's when we're going to deal with the engine coolant. So on Puffin, it has a Volvo Penta 2002 diesel, 2-cylinder diesel, and it is a raw water cooled. Now I converted it from a heat exchanger to the raw water, which was just removing a bunch of components and putting a couple pass-through pipes to reroute it. But with that, there's a thermostat in the engine that the engine has to warm up before that thermostat opens up and allows the fluid to go through. So with this engine in particular, what I'm going to do is remove the thermostat, put the cap back on, run the fluid through so that it immediately goes through, and because I'm not going to run the engine long enough for that thermostat to open up and allow the fluid to pass through all of the ports in the engine. So that's why I remove the thermostat to let the fluid flow freely through immediately so we can get everything in. This doesn't take that long. It takes longer to take the thermostat out oftentimes and the hose loose from the through hull than it does to actually run the fluid through the engine. Usually I run about 2 gallons of it through. I use the pink environmentally safe RV stuff, and that is plenty. So it's good for down to 50 below. So anyways, let me show you how you do it on this engine. All right, on this engine, the intake is actually pretty easy. It's right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that loose. We're going to find the best way to channel that so we can get it into a bucket full of antifreeze, and we're going to run that through. So let's get that off of there and see where we're going to run it. Okay, with this one, there's not really enough room up here at the front for this hose to get into a bucket. And I'm not going to hook up a second hose into it because I don't have one. So I'm just going to pull it out behind the engine, and there's plenty of space on this boat behind the engine to set a bucket, put this up in. You can see I took the thermostat out, I took the seal off of it, put it back on, tighten everything up so I'll be able to run everything through here. And that's just to make sure that our fluid goes freely through it and we don't have to wait for the engine to start to heat up to open up that thermostat. Once I'm all done, put the thermostat back in and we'll be all set. All right, so you can see I got much better space down here, so I'm going to put the bucket down in this area, take the hose, stick the hose down in the bucket after I start the engine. So I'm going to start the engine, then come down, stick the hose in the bucket, let it suck all that stuff through, and then make sure that we've got pink coming out the tailpipe. And if that's all good, then we're winterized. So I'll probably put 2 gallons through just to make sure, but that will get everything out of the engine block and pumped through to the exterior. So then we know that we won't have any water in the system and we'll be ready to go. So we got plenty of pink coming out the back end, so we're all good. I'm going to switch back the thermostat back in, tighten everything down, and we're good. Now, I did find that I have an exhaust leak in the back, which you're always going to find something, but being down there right next to it, definitely have an exhaust leak. So that's something I got to look into. I'll probably do that in the springtime, but it's good to kind of evaluate all that stuff and be down here while the engine's running so you can see what's going on. So engine is in effect winterized. I'm going to slap this stuff back together. We'll move on to the next thing. All right, let's talk about doing the head and the holding tank. So I pumped out the holding tank before I brought it in. So I put it at the pump out dock, pumped everything out, then filled the tank about halfway back full with water and pumped it out again. Now this is a bag instead of a rigid tank. I'm not a huge fan of the bags. Eventually I'll probably put a tank on this thing and increase its size a little bit, but right now it is what it is. It's sealed up and it's not hurting anything to be a bag, but eventually I'll replace that. So let me show you how we do the head and holding tank. All right, so we have this typical Jobsco head. It's just got the two selectors, one for dry, one for flush. One for flush dry and one for fill and flush. And this one, a little dirty, but off season, so not a problem. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fill this with a gallon of the RV fluid, and I'm going to pump it through to the holding tank just by using this. And I'm going to pump it through with the flush and fill first to pull any water that's in that hose out, and then I'll switch it over to the pump dry. Then I'm going to take this cover for the pump mechanism off, and I'm going to leave that off for the winter time just in case there's nothing in there that can freeze up and expand. I've had those things crack before. It literally takes 30 seconds to pull those screws out and just pull that thing up. So that's what I'm going to do here. All right, so I have no water coming in through the top here, so now I'm going to switch it over to pump dry. Run that through. I'm going to put a little bit back in the tank just so that there's a little bit in there, and then I'm going to pop this off, and then that will be all done. I've just got a little bit of water in here and maybe a little bit down there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pour a little bit of antifreeze in that. All right, so typically I would also winterize the water tanks for the potable water, but I didn't put anything in it this year, and I know they were bone dry, so I'm not going to worry about that. I am going to pour, after we clear these old beer cans out, down the sink, and then I'm going to put a couple gallons in the bilge, even though this bilge is really dry because we have a deck step mast and it just doesn't get much down here. I'm going to put some in there just to make sure. That way, if for some reason we do end up with a little bit of water in there, it's going to be mixed with antifreeze and we're not going to do any damage. There's no bilge down there, really. It's just the bottom of the hull is how they did this bilge, which in some ways is good, some ways is not. But either way, we just don't have a lot of water in the bilge on this boat. So we'll pump some, we'll put some down in there, and then boat's winterized. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do before I close the boat up for the day, I've got some work that I'm going to be doing on it, so I'm going to be on it pretty much every week. But I want to do something that's going to help to take care of the moisture. And what I use is these damp rid packs. So I'm not sponsored by them. They didn't send me these. I paid for these. I got them from Menards. But basically what they are is they're a packet that you hang, and it's got some desiccant up top, and this pulls the moisture in. And when it pulls the moisture in, it then drains down into this bag down here. So it does a really good job of keeping the boat nice and dry. This is a pretty dry boat. We don't have a lot coming through the deck, so we've really got one spot on one of the windows that's leaking. But other than that, it should stay pretty dry. But humidity gets in here, and we want to prevent that. So I hang these in each compartment, and it really does a pretty good job of taking care of it. So If you want to keep the moisture down, even during season, I have a couple of these hanging around that kind of have a decent smell to them if you get the right one. But these are really, really good system to keep the boat nice and dry. So hope that tip helps you. So that's about it for winterization of Puffin. There's a few other things that I'll do, but nothing too major. But we have a big list of projects that we got to get to on the boat. We're going to do the interior floors. We're going to do the deck repainting. We're going to do the replacement of the windows. I have to completely redo the electrical on the interior. And then there's just a bunch of small things like replacement of sheaves for deck organizers, making sure that my halyards really are how I want them to be and where they need to be, and then just a lot of cleanup on the boat. So we got a lot to do in the next 5 months that the boat will be out of the water, but I look forward to sharing those things with you, and we're going to dive into it in the next couple of weeks. We'll really get moving on some of those items. So hope you've enjoyed watching this. I hope you've enjoyed the first season of Puffin and the progress that we've gotten to this point. If you've liked the videos, please like and subscribe, and we look forward to sharing more with you as it comes. See you on the next one.